When a humble boy overhears the guards whispering in French about a hidden bomb, his courage to cry out in front of everyone saves the life of an arrogant millionaire and forever changes the fate of three very different worlds. Before we continue, subscribe now to the channel to receive powerful stories every day that touch the heart. The morning was alive in the heart of the city. The golden reflection of the sun stretched across the glass towers, while the sound of engines and hurried footsteps echoed through the vast square in front of the most luxurious hotel in the region. Men in suits rushed past, journalists adjusted their cameras, and security guards stood aligned, keeping impeccable order. Amid this scene of power and movement, one figure stood out. Daniel, a 12-year-old boy, thin, with a simple backpack on his shoulders and curious eyes that seemed to capture everything. He lacked the authority of the executives or the haste of the journalists, but he carried within himself something far more powerful, a courage he didn't even know he had. Mariana, his mother, walked beside him carrying a folder full of documents. Dressed modestly in a simple uniform, she worked as a housemaid for the French millionaire Henri Durand, who that day was attending yet another press conference. Mariana had brought Daniel along because the neighbor who usually watched him had canceled at the last minute. For her, it was just another exhausting morning, accompanying her employer, hoping it would all end quickly so she could return home. But for Daniel, that place pulsed like a new world, full of details waiting to be observed. The boy watched everything with silent fascination, noticing things that escaped the adults, too busy with their own routines. He had no idea that, on that morning, his attentive gaze would save lives. He couldn't imagine that his small discoveries in old French notebooks would become the key to preventing a tragedy. The clock was ticking. The millionaire approached the black car waiting for him, and Daniel, without realizing it, was already at the center of a story that would change destinies. What was about to happen would freeze the hearts of everyone in that square. Mariana was a 39-year-old woman who carried in her eyes the strength of someone who had learned to survive with little. Since becoming a widow, she had devoted every second of her life to working so she could give Daniel a decent education. The boy was her greatest pride, and despite all the difficulties, she encouraged him to study and dream beyond the tight walls of their small apartment. Daniel, in turn, had inherited not only her intelligence, but also the sensitivity to observe the world deeply. Henri Durand, Mariana's employer, was a man who exuded power. At 55, he had built a fortune and political influence that spanned continents. His demeanor was that of someone accustomed to being obeyed, and his routine followed a meticulously calculated rhythm. Few knew his human side, as the weight of business had hardened his heart. To him, employees were simply parts of a machine, useful but replaceable. Mariana knew this, but accepted it because she needed the job, never expecting recognition. Daniel, however, was not intimidated by appearances. From an early age, he had developed an almost insatiable curiosity. He spent hours in the neighborhood library reading about history, cultures, and languages. He had taught himself phrases in French, English, and Spanish, simply for the joy of discovering new sounds and meanings. It was a pastime his mother found charming, though she never imagined it could have any practical use. Until that day, when what seemed like simple curiosity would become a silent weapon against the darkness approaching. A small detail was about to make all the difference. That morning, everything seemed to follow its usual rhythm. Henri Durand had just left a press conference, surrounded by flashes and microphones. Mariana walked a few steps behind, focused, making sure the folder of documents stayed organized. Daniel, meanwhile, observed every detail around him. The guards, the line of black cars, the muffled conversations that echoed through the square. It was just another day in the lives of the powerful, but to him, it all felt like a living spectacle, as if he were standing inside a scene from a movie. Mariana tried to keep Daniel close, afraid he might get lost in the crowd. She knelt to adjust his shirt collar and firmly told him to stay by her side at all times. Daniel nodded, but his eyes kept scanning everything, alert to the movements around him. While his mother worried about discipline, he was absorbing signals that even the trained security guards seemed to miss. It was as if his instincts were whispering that something was wrong. The millionaire walked toward the black car waiting for him, shaking hands with acquaintances along the way. Everything seemed rehearsed, too perfect, almost artificial. But Daniel felt a shiver he couldn't explain. The air felt heavy, as if a secret was hidden between those walls of glass and marble. He didn't fully understand it yet, but he was about to uncover something that would make him doubt what he saw, and that uneasy feeling made him pay even closer attention. It was then that Daniel noticed two uniformed men near the car. At first glance, they looked like any other guards, rigid posture, serious expression. But something was off. Instead of scanning the area, they were leaning slightly toward each other, whispering in hushed tones. The boy edged closer discreetly, pretending to simply be watching the car, while in truth straining to catch their words. At first, it was nothing but indistinct murmurs. But suddenly, Daniel recognized certain sounds. It was French, a language he had studied on his own, scribbling phrases into worn-out notebooks. His heart pounded. The words were fragmented, rushed, but he understood enough to freeze where he stood. La bombe est sous le siège, avant le pont. Translated, the bomb is under the seat, before the bridge. A cold chill ran down Daniel's spine. His fingers tightened around the strap of his backpack, and the color drained from his face. He felt he needed to act, but fear held him back. Could he have misunderstood? Or did it mean exactly what it seemed? As the millionaire smiled and continued walking toward the car, Daniel's heartbeat grew so violent it felt like it would burst from his chest. He was facing a choice that could cost lives. Daniel froze, his ears still ringing with the French words that sounded like a death sentence. He knew he hadn't misunderstood. A bomb, hidden beneath the seat, set to detonate before reaching the bridge. The boy drew a shaky breath, trying to collect his thoughts, but with each step the millionaire took toward the car, the panic inside him grew louder. He felt far too small in the face of something so enormous. Yet the conviction that he needed to act grew just as quickly. Mariana noticed the change in her son's expression. His face had gone pale, his eyes wide, his hands trembling. She knelt down, worried, whispering softly to ask what had happened, but Daniel couldn't answer. He only stared fixedly at the two men who were still murmuring to each other, now exchanging quick, suspicious glances as if they were watching the clock. His mother insisted, gripping his shoulders, but he was trapped in a dilemma. Speak and risk sounding insane, or stay silent and allow a tragedy to unfold. Meanwhile, Mr. Durand was already approaching the vehicle, smiling and waving to photographers. The sound of engines and the bustle of the crowd drowned out the tension that only Daniel could sense. In that moment, the boy understood that silence would cost far too much. The clock seemed to speed up, and every step the millionaire took toward the car felt like a blow against his chest. The fear was immense, but courage was about to overcome it. Daniel felt his throat go dry. His mother kept asking what was wrong, but he only shook his head, unable to form words. His gaze shifted between the car, the disguised men, and his employer, who unknowingly was walking straight toward death. The boy remembered the long hours spent alone studying French in scribbled notebooks, and realized that all that effort suddenly carried a terrifying meaning. It wasn't just knowledge anymore, it was responsibility. He took a deep breath, trying to summon the courage. He thought about what would happen if he was wrong. People would laugh, his mother would be humiliated, and she might even lose her job. But what if he was right? The weight of that question pressed on his mind like a chain. Mariana, now desperate, cupped her son's face in her hands, demanding that he speak. Daniel wanted to, but fear paralyzed him. At that instant, Durand had already reached out to the car door handle. Time seemed to drag, and Daniel's heart pounded so loudly that each beat echoed in his ears. The whole world felt suspended, waiting for his decision. Either he spoke now, or it would be too late. And the choice he was about to make would change the story of everyone standing in that square. Suddenly, Daniel's voice tore through the heavy air like an unexpected thunderclap. "Don't get in the car," he shouted, with all the strength he had. The sound cut across the murmur of the square, making journalists, executives, and onlookers turn their heads all at once. Mariana was stunned, not understanding, trying to pull her son closer, but it was too late. All eyes were already on them. Henri Durand froze mid-step, confused. His official bodyguards immediately turned, glancing from the boy to their employer, unsure of what was happening. But Daniel's tone was so urgent, so desperate, that it stopped the millionaire in his tracks for a few seconds. This was no ordinary cry. It was a warning loaded with raw fear. The two men near the car, disguised until then, exchanged a quick glance that betrayed their nerves. One reached for his pocket, and the other tried to move forward but halted when he saw every eye fixed on them. Mariana, trembling, clutched her son tightly, still not fully grasping the gravity of it, but sensing that something terribly wrong was happening. A child's voice had just shattered the carefully rehearsed order of that morning. And what came next would prove Daniel was right. The shout echoed like a rupture through the polished routine of the place. The two supposed guards straightened immediately, trying to recover their composure, but the sweat on their foreheads betrayed their panic. One of them nervously pressed his earpiece, muttering something under his breath as if stalling for time. The other, even more agitated, took a step toward the car, as if trying to prevent any inspection. Durand, now with suspicion heavy on his face, raised his hand and ordered his Real security team to check the vehicle. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every second seemed to stretch until one of the men finally opened the rear door. A faint metallic ticking escaped from inside, freezing the blood of everyone present. The journalists, moments earlier chasing headlines, dropped their cameras to the ground. The entire square held its breath. Mariana clutched Daniel in desperation, her heart racing, while the millionaire instinctively stepped back. The secret was out. The car concealed something deadly. The masks of the false guards had fallen, and tension erupted into screams, chaos, and hurried orders. What would happen in the next moments would push everyone to the edge of the abyss, and Daniel's courage would be the thin line between life and death. The ticking sound inside the car seemed to slice through the air like a blade. No one moved, as if time itself had frozen in the face of the invisible threat. The real guards surrounded the vehicle, one signaling with his hand for everyone to step back. People in the square began to flee, dropping briefcases, bags, and even cameras, while mothers pulled their children away and executives rushed to hide behind marble columns. Panic spread quickly. Daniel trembled in Mariana's arms, but his eyes remained fixed on the scene, unable to look away. He wondered if there was still enough time to prevent the worst, or if it was already too late. Mariana, in turn, tried to calm him, but her voice faltered, gripped by the terror of realizing that something truly horrific was about to happen. Never in her life had she imagined being caught in the middle of such a scene, and the instinct to protect her son was the only thing keeping her standing. Henri Durand, his heart pounding, finally grasped the gravity of the situation. For the first time in a long while, he was not the millionaire in control of everything, but a man vulnerable in the face of a lethal threat. He hesitated, stepping back twice, when the metallic ticking grew louder. It was as though fate itself was counting aloud every second left. And in that moment, it became clear that the decision he made could mean his life or his death. Then the explosion came. A deafening blast shook the ground, sending a thick cloud of black smoke across the hotel's entrance like a deadly veil. The car shattered into flames, fragments flying in every direction. People screamed, alarms went off, and the sound of breaking glass echoed through the entire block. The impact was so powerful that Henri was thrown to the ground, his chest burning, his ears ringing. Mariana threw herself over Daniel, shielding him with her own body. She felt the heat of the blast and the metallic taste of dust flooding her mouth, but the only thing that mattered was keeping her son alive in her arms. Daniel, though in shock, couldn't stop staring at the spot where the car had been. If he hadn't shouted, that would have been the millionaire's fate. The courage he never knew he had just saved countless lives. As the smoke began to clear, the scene was one of destruction. Nearby cars burned, shards of metal littered the ground, and sirens wailed in the distance. The two imposter guards tried to flee in the chaos, but were quickly overpowered by the real agents. Their disguise had collapsed, and now everyone knew that the child who dared to speak had exposed a secret no one else had noticed. But the true weight of what had just happened was only beginning to be felt. Not long after, safely inside a secured police room, the truth began to surface. Investigators discovered that the two false security guards were part of a criminal network hired to eliminate Henri Durand. The plan had been flawless. Infiltrate disguised men, plant the bomb in the car, and detonate it only once he was on the move, ensuring there would be no chance of survival. If it hadn't been for Daniel's intervention, the millionaire would never have escaped alive. Durand, seated at the table with his face still covered in dust, couldn't take his eyes off the boy. He, who had always believed that power and safety lay in his wealth and influence, now faced the reality that his life had been saved by the voice of a humble child, the son of the maid he barely noticed. The realization hit him like a shock. His world had crumbled, and a new truth was rising before his very eyes. Mariana, meanwhile, could hardly believe it. She held tightly to Daniel's hand, as if afraid to let go, silently thanking her son's unexpected courage. The revelation wasn't just about the bomb and the imposter guards, but about how even the smallest detail, a boy learning French out of curiosity, could be the difference between life and death. And as police officers led the criminals away in handcuffs, everyone there knew this story was far from over. Hours later, in the silence of the police station, Henri Durand sat across from Mariana and Daniel. His eyes, once cold and calculating, now shimmered with something he barely recognized: gratitude. Looking at the boy, his voice broke as he spoke. "You saved me, Daniel." How did you know?" The boy, timid, answered simply. They spoke in French. Mariana looked at her son in surprise, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. She never imagined that those hours spent with old notebooks and borrowed books would bear such important fruit. To her, Daniel had always been just a curious boy, but now everyone saw him as someone capable of changing the fate of a powerful man. In that moment, she realized it wasn't only the millionaire's life that had been transformed, theirs had as well. Henri drew a deep breath, and for the first time in years, a sincere smile appeared on his face. "I have money, I have power, but no one had ever done this for me." No one had ever saved me." His words echoed in the room, and Mariana felt the weight of them. The millionaire, once untouchable, now stood stripped of all arrogance. His world had shifted, and the seed of something new was only beginning to grow. But this transformation still held greater surprises for everyone involved. In the days that followed, Henri Durand could not push from his mind the image of Daniel shouting for him not to get into the car. That small voice, coming from someone so unlikely, echoed in his thoughts as a reminder that life could not be controlled solely with money or power. For the first time in a long while, he felt a desire to truly know the people around him, beginning with the woman and the boy who had given him a second chance. Henri began visiting Mariana and Daniel in their modest home. Walking through the narrow doorway and into the small apartment, he was struck by the simplicity of the place. A tiny kitchen, worn furniture, but a home filled with warmth that he had not felt in years within his silent mansions. As he watched Daniel eagerly showing the notebooks where he studied languages, Henri realized how much he had ignored the simple things that gave life its true meaning. Mariana, still cautious, accepted the approach with care, but she couldn't deny noticing a true change in her employer. Daniel, on the other hand, bonded quickly, delighted by the attention of someone who finally seemed to truly see him. For the millionaire, the boy's innocent laughter felt like a cure for invisible wounds. He didn't know it yet, but this bond would transform not only his daily routine, but also the way he viewed the world. And little by little, that connection began to change everything. Henri, long accustomed to cold decisions and million-dollar negotiations, began to find joy in things he once considered trivial. He started helping Daniel with new books, encouraging him to keep studying languages. He even went so far as to fund language courses in the neighborhood in the boy's name, so that other children could also have the chance to learn something that might change their futures. The millionaire, who had always built walls around himself, was now using his fortune to open doors. For Mariana, this transformation was almost unbelievable. The man who once barely greeted her now listened to her stories, helped fix things around the house, and even offered to carry groceries. She saw in him a vulnerability she never imagined existed, and in her heart grew a respect that went beyond professional boundaries. The look Henri gave Daniel was no longer that of a distant employer, but of someone who saw the son he never had. Daniel, who deeply missed his late father, found in Henri a figure who inspired him, not because of money or status, but because of his genuine attention, the conversations about languages and cultures, and the way he truly believed in him. The change was clear. The millionaire who once lived only for himself had now discovered that the greatest wealth lay in sharing. But the ultimate lesson was still to come, and it would not be spoken in numbers, but in words that would mark his memory forever. Months later, the trio returned to the same square where everything had happened. The hotel had been repaired, the debris cleared, but the memory of that day still lingered in the air. Daniel gazed at the golden reflection of the glass towers. As if reliving each second of the moment, he shouted to save the millionaire. Mariana, at his side, squeezed his hand with pride, while Henri stood silently, watching them with eyes brimming with emotion. The millionaire stepped closer to Daniel and, with a trembling voice, said, "You didn't just save my life. You showed me that even the smallest voice can change someone's destiny. You taught me what it truly means to live." The boy, shy, lowered his eyes, but a faint smile appeared on his lips. Mariana discreetly wiped away a tear, feeling part of something greater than she had ever imagined. That moment was not just a memory of fear overcome, but proof that courage, love, and kindness can transform any story. Henri knew he had been given more than a second chance. He had gained a family that reminded him every day that power without humanity means nothing. And there, before the square alive once again, each of them realized that the past had been rewritten by a single act of courage. The morning sun once again lit up the city, reflecting off the glass windows like a symbol of new beginnings. Mariana hugged Daniel proudly, and Henri, standing beside them, smiled sincerely, feeling that for the first time in decades, he was not alone. That simple scene carried immense weight. It wasn't about money, it wasn't about fame, but about the certainty that kindness, when put into action, has the power to save lives and transform hearts. Daniel looked at the millionaire and then at his mother, and a sense of peace washed over him. He was no longer just the boy who studied French phrases out of curiosity. Now he was the boy who proved that even the weakest voice can echo louder than fear. Mariana felt the same pride, recognizing that her son had made history. And Henri, who for so long had lived surrounded by empty luxury, understood that true wealth was found in that very simplicity. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now, leave your like, and share this video so that more people can discover that even the smallest act of courage can change the world. Write in the comments, "I believe in the power of courage." Together, let's spread stories that transform lives and prove that hope can rise from the most unexpected voices.